Hello, friends, and let's get started.
In the suburbs of Boston, where houses stand low, paths are perfectly swept, and every other resident has a small garden, a couple lived in a cozy two-story cottage on a quiet street. Their names were Josh and Amber. They had been together for 7 years and were considered quite a stable, harmonious couple in the neighborhood. Even friends said, if we ever wonder what a real family means, we always cite you as an example. Josh is a tall, slightly stooped man of 35. He worked as a financial consultant for a small firm and always stayed a little in the shadows. It was his nature. He wasn't much for being the center of attention, but he loved order and quiet. Amber, on the other hand, was a bright, emotional woman who always craved novelty and drive. Since childhood, she has been drawn to creativity. First painting, then organizational projects at university, and in the last year or two, she has suddenly become fascinated by the world of psychology, coaching, and podcasts. Amber's desire to talk to people about what matters most came out of the blue. She started listening to podcasts about mindfulness, then started trying voice memos herself. Gradually, she moved from short notes to a format of half-hour conversations, where she invited people she knew, an amateur psychologist, a life coach, a couple of aspiring bloggers. At first, an old laptop and a simple microphone were enough for her to try. But when people started writing, "Listen, you have an interesting voice, do it more regularly," she seriously considered investing. Josh always supported his wife in her hobbies. He thought it was nice and even useful. Let Amber find herself, since painting is boring, he thought. He saved a little from his paycheck, and when she mentioned that she wanted a quality sound card and a good microphone, he didn't hesitate to buy her a professional set. It was obvious that she was as excited as a child. Her eyes lit up. He felt proud that he was able to bring his wife joy. Everything seemed to be going beautifully. Amber found herself in a new business. Josh was happy to be a technical assistant, setting up sound, learning the basics of editing, studying the instructions for complex software. Soon the podcast began to come out once a week. They called it Closer Than It Seems, ostensibly about the fact that the most valuable is always near. You just need to pay attention. The couple agreed that Josh would never interfere with his wife's work and would not impose his topics. "It's your project," he often repeated. "I'm just following the technique here." For her part, Amber promised that she would never turn their family issues inside out and bring personal details into the content. She understood the importance of respecting boundaries. For the first few months, both enjoyed this peaceful cooperation. The house was still a cozy rear, dinners were still traditional and relaxed, and Amber only hinted a couple of times that she could be a modern psychologist and help people talk about intimate things more openly. But Josh only smiled and replied, "Just don't overdo it." Her enthusiasm was infectious. Listeners were adding to the list, even though there weren't too many of them. This whole world of podcasts, live streams, and blogger collaborations seemed foreign to Josh, but he was genuinely happy for his wife. He loved the way her eyes lit up when she was talking to the next guest. Sometimes he joked, "You're like a broadcaster, only without the live broadcast." And she laughed back, "I'm better because I'm my own producer." So in the house established an unspoken order. The living room was set up as a mini studio. A couple of chairs, microphones, echo filters, and annoying green carpeting, which Amber considered an important acoustic element. Most of the guests came during the day while Josh was at work. He only noticed the occasional change. Suddenly, there were branded mugs with the Closer Than You Think logo in the cupboard and posters with motivational quotes on the wall. But all seemed harmless. In their 7th year of marriage, things seemed calm. On the surface, at least. Amber didn't complain. Josh didn't express any discontent. If one were to look at the couple from the outside, they wouldn't see the slightest sign of a storm. It was the kind of weather that sometimes produced the most devastating storms, though cloudless and warm. As Amber settled in and became a little more well-known in the local podcast community, so-called experts reached out to her. Coaches, online psychologists, authors of personal growth trainings, they all wanted to shine, to get a piece of the limelight. Josh didn't mind. More guests meant Amber would grow faster and have more opportunities. Sometimes he joked that soon she'd have to hire a PR person. Over time, however, he noticed an oddity. The issue recordings began to stretch into the evening. "You used to record in the daytime," he asked cautiously one day. "Why are you sitting editing until 1 o'clock in the morning now?" Amber shrugged, smiled, and replied as if it were the most natural thing to do. "Well, some people only have the evening free. I mean, I have guests from other states now, different time zones." It seemed logical at first, but soon the situation began to repeat itself all too often. At home, there was the soft but constant background of editing software. Voices, male and female, came from the headphones. Occasionally, Josh would notice Amber laughing some new, more playful laugh while talking to someone on Zoom. He tried not to be jealous. After all, she'd once given her word that she wouldn't drag her personal stuff into the podcast, and the evening calls themselves weren't supposed to mean anything criminal. Nevertheless, another thing was bothering her. Amber was becoming more distant. Whereas before they'd always eaten dinner together, now she often skipped dinner, shut herself away in her room with her laptop. Her arguments were always something like, "I don't want to interrupt, I'm inspired," or "I can't leave a guest, we're almost done." And sometimes she'd also add, "You're being supportive yourself, love, aren't you?" Josh felt a slight unease, but he couldn't explain what exactly was bothering him. He was really trying to be indulgent. He was even proud. "My wife is on her way to success." But something in her voice, in her look was changing. "How are the recordings going?" he asked. "Wonderful. Such interesting people," she answered almost on automatic. One day, he noticed in the bedroom an expensive blouse he had never seen before. When asked, "When did you buy it?" Amber replied through a smile, "You know I'm a girl. I like to pamper myself with nice clothes." But in the back of his mind, Josh felt a slight prick. Who wants to like her at home in the evening if no one can see her when she's recording a podcast? Everything accelerated that day when Josh, coming home in the late afternoon, decided to turn on another episode of the podcast. He rarely did that, for he honored the unwritten pact to stay out of his wife's creative work. But now he was just looking for a way to pass the time in traffic. At first, there was no sign of trouble. Another guest was talking about psychological freedom, openness in relationships, and other popular formulations. Josh was about to switch over because he wasn't interested in these motivational speeches. But suddenly, in the middle of the episode, he heard Amber's voice interrupting him and laughing. "Yes, of course you're still as passionate as you were the other night," she said. And the laughter, light, almost flirtatious. Josh almost missed a turn when he realized how frank it sounded. She addressed her interlocutor informally, as if they were sharing some common secret. Moreover, the tone was so intimate that his throat constricted. He remembered that he hadn't heard laughter like that in quite some time. Josh felt hot. He stopped at the supermarket, turned off the motor, rewound a few seconds, and re-listened. "Right? You're still as passionate as you were that night." What that night? Why is she talking to this man in that tone of voice? He noticed that the guest laughed as well and didn't retort. Josh tried to recognize the voice, but only realized it was a man in his mid-30s, speaking confidently with a slight hoarseness. The night traffic was sprawling, cars honking. Sitting in his Toyota, Josh felt as if something inside him had snapped. "How so passionate?" ran through his head. He listened to the end. The issue ended quite normally, no direct provocation. But at the very end, Amber added, "Go to our website, leave questions. See you soon." And a second later, a short pause and a careless line that apparently was forgotten to cut. "All that remains is to agree when we'll meet again off the record." It was a second, literally a couple words, and that was it. But Josh heard it. He never edited the entire podcast himself, just set up the tech. Apparently, Amber had started working on the tracks herself and missed something, or didn't see fit to clean up. He couldn't understand the logic. He felt a lump of rage and resentment growing inside. He felt like calling right now and asking, "Is this a joke?" But he held back. Wrong place, wrong time. He started the car and walked slowly, tardily, toward the house. That laugh wouldn't get out of his head. So she's laughing with someone else? Anxiety gathered momentum, and with it the determination to get to the truth. Not wanting to act hastily, Josh decided to start by examining the materials. Since his wife produced podcasts and did so publicly, All the episodes were online. He returned home glumly, but said he'd been delayed by traffic and was tired. Amber, sitting at her laptop, nodded and didn't even ask him how his day was. It was like she was preoccupied with something. Maybe another guest on a video call. Secluded in the next room, Josh pulled out his tablet and logged onto the podcast page. There were about 20 episodes from the past few months. He thought he'd glimpsed them all, but now realized he hadn't listened to any of them in their entirety. He needed to fill in the gap. He started with the most recent one, just the one he'd heard in the car, to make sure he wasn't missing anything. Yes, there really was that phrase there. Then he went backwards, chronologically. Listened carefully, trying to catch Amber's intonations, listening to the voices of the people he was talking to. They were mostly girls, sometimes couples. But in issue number 15, a man appeared, introduced himself as Dylan, relationship coach. Josh immediately felt a chill. The voice resembled the same one, only a little less husky. Perhaps it really was the same person. At the end of the 15th episode, when they'd said goodbye, Amber had said it had been awesome and that we should do it again sometime, but not online. Again, the same playful chuckle. If Josh hadn't been analyzing the text, just listening in the background, he might have missed it. But now he was studying the conversation with a magnifying glass. It was getting more and more disturbing. The worst of it all came in the 14th episode. The description read, "The theme is female fulfillment in relationships." Josh knew that Amber had said she was sick that day. He remembered her lying in bed, coughing, refusing to eat, and convincing him that the taping should be rescheduled. He then canceled his weekend plan to sit by her side and help her if she needed anything. And in the evening, he left for a couple hours on business, returning with medicine and fruit. As he opened episode 14, Josh heard her speaking in a ringing, cheerful voice, with a man quietly chiming in next to her, the same voice. There wasn't even a whiff of a cold. Apparently, she was lying about being sick, so she could stay home alone and record the issue with this Dylan. Moreover, in the middle of the conversation, she said, "I can't wait to continue practicing after this call." The guest replied in a flirtatious tone, "And I'd be happy if we discussed it in person. I'm sure we'll have plenty of time for everything." Josh's heart clenched. He began to replay that day in his head. She had said she couldn't get out of bed, and then, now everything looked completely different. Oh, and the words practice made his imagination paint obscenely clear pictures. He listened to a few more episodes and wrote out all the fragments that seemed suspicious. It turned out that this was not an isolated case. They kept alluding to off-air meetings, to that one passion, to special techniques you can't tell about in a podcast. Plus, the dates coincided. Every time Josh thought Amber was rescheduling a recording or chatting with someone online, she was actually with Dylan, sometimes in the house, sometimes unbeknownst to him. That's when Josh decided to check the geotags of the issues. He knew that Amber sometimes turned on geolocation to show where she was airing from. To his great surprise and bitterness, the issue labeled from Texas Studio had an actual geotag of their own home. No Texas was ever there in the first place. She misled everyone, which meant it was likely that for weeks now, Amber had been seeing this Dylan, and God knows what they had going on. Isn't it obvious what, though, ran through her head? So, step by step, the puzzle was forming into a most unpleasant picture. The wife was secretly dating her lover under the cover of her interviews. Moreover, she shamelessly talked about their intimacy directly in the recordings, a little veiled, but frankly giggling, and after editing the issues. Perhaps she figured Josh wouldn't listen. Or maybe she thought that if he noticed a couple of innocent phrases, he wouldn't care. But now he realized one thing. He had hard evidence on his hands, and he had to do something. Now, the next day Josh, overcoming the lump in his throat and the hot wave of resentment, tried to act like nothing had happened. He looked forward to Saturday morning when the two of them usually had coffee together. But Amber announced that she had an important recording session and was already getting ready to go somewhere with a microphone. Josh held back the urge to ask a direct question. "Are you and Dylan testing your passion again?" But he kept his mouth shut. He realized that he needed more confidence before he could make a scene. "Tell me who you're interviewing today." Josh tried to speak in a casual tone, as if he was really just curious. Amber cast a quick glance from behind her coffee cup. A coach from Texas, she lied without blinking. He has a unique technique for releasing fears. I just found out about him recently. I'd like to interview him first. Where will you record it? A co-working space. We have rented meeting rooms. Don't worry. She said it calmly, looking boldly into her husband's eyes. He felt his jaw clench with rage, but outwardly remained stony-faced. For a few moments, he thought she was even enjoying her lies. Maybe she was enjoying this game? Fine, he finally said. Good luck with that. Can you give me a link to the issue later? I wonder what the unique methodology is. Something like concern flashed in her eyes for a split second, but she smiled immediately. Sure, hear everything when it comes out. Amber left, and Josh was left sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the white wall where, not so long ago, their pictures of them together from their trips had hung. Now the photos were in a drawer, and a poster of some kind of psychological intensives hung on the wall. Since the podcast had taken over Amber's life, she'd taken down almost all the family photos, replacing them with motivational posters. At the time, I thought it was just her new phase, he thought bitterly. But really, that was the first wake-up call. Josh knew she'd come back tonight, tired as usual. She'd probably say, "Talk for 5 hours. It's been such a tough day for me." And not even a stutter about what she'd really been doing. He decided at the time, I won't ask her directly, but I'll prepare. He spent the whole day preparing. Prepared a list of episodes with exact time codes where questionable lines were spoken. He scrolled through several episodes and cut off the necessary fragments. Short audio files from which even the most naive listener would realize that it was about a love affair. Finally, he remembered that there was a small surveillance camera in the kitchen doorway, installed a couple of years ago when there had been burglaries in the neighborhood. The camera was rarely used, but still worked. Josh hadn't checked the footage in a while, but maybe there was something useful in there? He went into the archive. One recent video, recorded Tuesday afternoon, clearly showed Amber walking out of the kitchen with a man a little taller than her. He walks down the hallway past the camera. The face is not perfectly visible, but enough to realize this is no friend, but clearly a stranger. He has stiff dark hair, a well-groomed beard, and is casually wearing a black shirt. The time of the recording is 2:20 p.m. Amber texts him that day. "I'm not feeling well, lying in bed, can't even go out." And that's just one entry. Combining inner pain with sudden cold clarity, Josh recognized that he now had enough facts. Tonight, he would give her a serious talking to. He simultaneously wanted to scream, to tear everything apart, and at the same time, to figure it out, to see if he was wrong. But the facts did not lie. That evening, as expected, Amber returned around 7. Bright lipstick, the slight scent of a new perfume Josh hadn't smelled before. Her smile seemed strained. When he began his usual tone of questioning, "How was your day? What did the coach say?" she answered with fake cheerfulness, trying harder to change the subject. Finally, he backed off a couple steps and gave out. "Look, Em, I get it. You have a new project. But tell me honestly, why does your Texas guest have a Boston accent? She's tense. Why would you say that?" "Oh, I just listened to a little bit of it." He looked her straight in the eye. Her face paled, but she quickly pulled herself together. "You know what, darling, I'm tired. Let's discuss it later." "Okay," he replied calmly. "We'll discuss it in the morning." She tried to rush past him into the bedroom, but he caught her by the arm. "Wait, can you at least tell me who it was in the house today?" He said it slowly, looking into her eyes. She yanked her hand free from his grip. "No one. Nothing happened. You have to trust me." She quickly disappeared into the bedroom. Josh stayed in the hallway, clenching his fists. Tomorrow he would set everything straight. He could no longer contain his pain or his anger. The next morning, Josh waited for Amber to get up and come out of the bedroom. She said a strained hello, went into the kitchen, and poured herself a coffee. He silently opened her Instagram, an account for the podcast Closer Than It Looks, which had a few thousand followers, and posted reels. It was a short snippet of the very moment from a recent episode where Amber tells the interviewer in a half-joking tone, "You're still as passionate as you were the other night." And what follows is her laughter. After the laughter, he added a couple seconds where the man can be heard replying, "You haven't changed either. You've even gotten braver." Wrapping up the footage is Amber herself, smiling into the camera. Underneath the video, Josh wrote, "Amber at her best. A podcast about honesty, intimacy, and something else. Watch and listen, friends." He clicked publish, and a few seconds later, a notification appeared on his screen. The clip had uploaded. Amber, unsuspecting, checked her day planner, but 3 minutes later, her phone vibrated. She squinted in surprise for a few seconds, then raised her eyebrows and irritably swiped her finger across the screen. Apparently, she'd gone to Instagram. The look on her face changed to one of panic. She immediately flipped to the social network itself, went to post, and saw that very clip. What? This is what? Her voice trailed off. Josh was sitting across from her, staring at her phone as if checking her browsing stats. "It's a teaser of your podcast, honey. Isn't that great? Why did you do that?" She hissed, getting up from her chair. "Do you realize that everyone will think, are you crazy? Put that away right now." "No, people have a right to hear what you're talking about with your guests. Especially these special guests, right?" Her face flushed with anger. She grabbed her phone, immediately trying to delete the clip. But Josh had uploaded it from his profile, which had admin access. She frantically clicked the screen for a second, but the posting had been made through a bundle of his personal account and the podcast account, where he also had access. Amber couldn't navigate the settings quickly. Panic kept her from concentrating. Meanwhile, comments were already pouring in on the clip. "Wow, bold confession, Amber. Is this flirting? Come on. What passion? I need to listen to the whole episode right now. I see you have your own way of communicating." The number of hits was growing. She watched the counter run. 105, 120, 180. People are actively watching. Some are writing private messages. She suddenly became afraid. After all, this issue was listened to by many people, but no one has not yet paid attention to this phrase so closely. And now, the whole pitch is centered on it. "You're completely insane," she blurted out. "You ruined my project. People are about to think that this is... What is it? That you're having intimacy with a guest?" Josh asked in a calm, almost icy voice. "Isn't that what it really is?" She opened her mouth, but couldn't find the words. After a moment, Amber sat up, with heavy breathing and red blotches on her neck, grabbed Josh's shoulder. "Look, put the post away. It's setting me up, and it's setting you up too. Please, I'll explain everything." Josh stood up, yanking the phone out of her hands. She tried deleting something again. "No, now the whole world will hear. And I want you to know that I've been listening to your episodes. Every single one. And now I have questions." She tried to justify herself. It was just a phrase that came out. There's nothing there. We were recording a joke, but it was already clear to him. Within a couple hours, their house had become the scene of a heated discussion. Amber was frantically rushing around the rooms, tearing posters off the wall, muttering, "I don't want this to be seen." The phone would ring periodically, friends asking, "What's going on? Is this your new trolling or what?" A sponsor who was recently going to endorse her podcast wrote a puzzled message. "We're going to hold off on the contract for now. The situation looks ambiguous." She realized she was losing her reputation, losing face, everything she'd been building. There may have even been some people who were supportive and didn't see anything catastrophic in her words, but panic was already pounding in her head. She saw the image of the advanced presenter helping others find honesty and sincerity crumbling before her eyes. And here was such a dirty and ambiguous phrase. At one point, Amber, flushed with anger and despair, lashed out at Josh in the living room. "You ruined my project. Why would you do that? This was my business, my dream. Now it's all gone." He calmly stared at her with the very tablet where her compromising audio had been collected. "Tell me better, who destroyed our marriage?" He asked quietly. "Was it a project you were doing, or something else at the same time?" She trembled, tears coming to her eyes. But she wanted to look strong, not bend to his accusations. "What's ridiculous, Josh? It's just flirting, okay? And anyway, I was doing an interview. It's a normal part of the show to ask a provocative question. Come on." He pulled out his phone and turned on the camera, which clearly showed her holding the hand of the Dylan in the hallway of their house. Was that part of the show too? She suddenly stopped talking. After a moment's stupor, she said, He was helping me with the tech. Then we had a discussion. You know, a discussion in the bedroom? He clarified. She looked away. He unfolded the list of episodes in front of her, where the titles clearly indicated the days when Amber was supposed to be sick or away on a bachelorette party or on another urgent matter. And in reality, she was taping a Dylan episode under the guise of a remote conversation. You lied about everything, from your illness to your Texas coach. His voice was firm, but there was pain in his eyes that he was holding back. And I don't want to take it anymore. Josh, this is a mistake. I'm confused. He really is a coach, and it's not what you think. Is it? What do I think? Josh turns on another tape where Amber whispers, I'm imagining us doing that night again. It was so hot, a male voice laughs. She clutched her head and burst into tears. A stream of excuses couldn't override this evidence. You ruined everything, she sobbed, not so aggressively anymore. Why are you putting me on display for everyone to see? No, Em. He said it almost in a whisper. You ruined it. I just lifted the veil. When the emotions had subsided, Amber tried to pull herself together. Clenching her fists, wiping away her tears, she walked over to her husband and said, Let's try to resolve this like adults. Without scandals. Delete the damn clip. I'll explain everything in the new issue. I'll say it was a creative experiment, a misunderstanding, or something like that. And then what? You're going to keep seeing this guy? No. It's over. I didn't mean to. It was a mistake, a crush. I don't know how it happened. I'm sorry. She suddenly grabbed his hands, looking up at him from under her wet lashes. I've realized everything. Really, I won't. When Josh heard that, he closed his eyes as if trying to hold back tears. For too long, he'd been carrying resentment and bewilderment, and now the anger was mixed with bitterness. He saw before him the woman he'd once considered nearest and dearest, and he felt that he did not recognize her. All the tricks, the lies, the wild insolence. It was as if it were a completely different person. He slowly took her hands away. You said your podcast was your confession, your truth, your opportunity to open people's eyes to real sincerity. Now the whole world has heard you. She collapsed on the couch and burst into tears, burying her face in the pillow. He stared at her for a minute, then turned and went to the hall closet. There he pulled out his suitcase, started throwing shirts, jeans in there. Took a couple coats off the closet. Amber jumped up like a whipped girl, looking at him with desperation. Wait, what are you doing? Where? I'm leaving. His voice sounded muffled but adamant. And I'm not coming back. Josh, no, wait. It was stupid. I don't know how or why. Please give me a chance, please. She pleaded, sobbing, almost grabbing at the hem of his jacket. He gently pulled her away. It's too late, Em. I can't live with a man who's willing to lie to my face like that. Who puts a man in our house and pretends to record an online broadcast? It was stupid, but we can make this work. I love you. Don't go. In response, cold silence and the clanking of the suitcase clasp. His hands were shaking. His heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was about to burst through his chest. He exhaled quietly and said, You know, I haven't heard the phrase, I love you from you in a long time. Not in life, not on a podcast. And now I don't believe it anymore. He nodded toward her laptop. Write down whatever you want in there. Tell me how you feel. But you've already lost me. He picked up his suitcase, took his jacket off the rack, and left, slamming the door behind him. Amber collapsed to her knees and sobbed. Never before had so much grief sounded in their house. It had been a month. Everything had changed. The house they'd lived in together was technically Josh's. Now he'd stayed there until the court ruled, but he'd moved to Portland, Maine. Why there? He didn't really know. He just wanted to get away from Boston, from all the hustle and bustle of the city, from his memories. There he rented a small studio overlooking the ocean. His job allowed him to do online counseling, so there was no problem. All the activity around the podcast, closer than it seems, after the scandalous video has increased dramatically, but in a negative way. The comments rang out in different ways. Some scolded Amber for hypocrisy. Some said it's her private life. Some just gossiped. Sponsors who wanted to support the project refused to cooperate. Amber was forced to record a short video message in which, crying, she stated, It was a misunderstanding. You misinterpreted everything. But her words sounded unconvincing. Dylan, the same lover coach, disappeared from the public eye. He didn't comment on anything, put a lock on his social media accounts. It seems that it was more convenient for him to leave than to participate in the scandal. So Amber was left alone in the wave of condemnation and ridicule. As a result, a month after the high-profile story, a short episode was aired on Closer Than It Looks. No musical intro, no jokes. Just Amber's steady breathing and her quiet voice. Everyone who's still listening to this, I don't know what to say. Sometimes we want to share what's inside with a huge audience and not with the people who really need to be told, our loved ones. And sometimes we say too much, sometimes to the wrong people and about the wrong things. I don't want to make excuses or expose new details right now. Everyone draws their own conclusion. I hope you will make the right conclusion for yourself. What followed was silence for half a minute. Then the episode simply ended. There were no more episodes. Josh, being already far away, listened to this short file, accidentally seeing a notification in the feed. He was sitting at a small table in an apartment overlooking the harbor, drinking coffee from a ceramic cup that he himself had recently purchased at a local market. Hearing Amber's voice, he felt his heart clench a little, but suddenly he smiled. That short chuckle that hadn't made itself known in a long time. He stared at the waves rippling off the pier and felt relief finally come somewhere inside him. Yes, he lost his family of 7 years, but he had found freedom and honesty with himself. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he could breathe without wondering, is the person I love lying to me right now? That evening, he discovered another podcast, a very small and obscure one about traveling in New England that a casual acquaintance had recommended to him. He turned on one of the episodes and smiled as he heard the host's unassuming but sincere conversations. It seemed to him that there was more sincerity in this simple chatter about sea winds and street art than there was in all those advanced episodes of Amber. And that thought made him feel calm. Josh spent the rest of the evening looking at the night lights by the water and relaxing to the sound of the waves. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he could laugh again, genuinely, without bitterness. And now he knew for sure that his life went on. And that's where today's story ends. Thank you for watching to the end. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and comment. We'd love to discuss this story with you. See you in the next video.